very quickly the ground rules for the session, because it's a little bit of a different one, just so you're aware of what our speakers have been tasked with. So basically what they have is a single static slide for the duration of the 3 minutes of their talk. Okay, so they're not allowed any animations or movements or any fancy parts to the presentations or videos and sounds, etc. Okay, they have been limited to 3 minutes for this, and anyone who goes over that time will be disqualified. Obviously, you know, given our virtual nature, we will sort of, you know, ensure that we can accommodate that as best as possible. So a reminder to our speakers, if I'm sure you're all here and ready, I will sort of raise my hand with 30 seconds to go to just highlight to you that you have 30 seconds to go. Okay, I will then sort of turn my mic on and notify for you to finish your sort of sentence if you are still going on that 3 minute mark. So I hope that's okay with you. Okay, so again, just to remember, you know, all of the sort of rules apply, and the decision of our judges at the end is a final one on my sheet to remind everybody. So yes, hopefully this will be a great session. We've got 5 speakers. So as a reminder, we will be taking questions during the talks. We will hold them until the end, and we'll facilitate a bit of a Q&A. And yeah, just look forward to this fun and fast-paced session to hear in sort of these quick snippets of some of the exciting research that is going on. So I think that's everything on my list I was supposed to remind everyone. Yep, Q&A's at the end. We've got 5 students. I'll put my hand up, so please don't pop your hand up during the talks, and the session is being recorded. Okay, so thank you all. I think we are there ready to start. So just before I introduce you, I'm just going to make sure that I've got my my stopwatch ready here as well. So I will be setting the time. Okay, great. So I think then that we are ready to start. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker of the session. It is Sama Javdian. Now I hope I pronounced that right. I do apologize. Normally I check that in advance. I think then if we bring up that slide, do we have the slide ready to go?
Yeah.
I think it's just loading. Who's got those slides? There we are then. So I will let you introduce yourself when you make a start. Are you ready to go? And I will hit the stopwatch. So yeah, I'll hand over to Sama, then our first presenter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Penny. My name is Sama, and my research has the UK residing Iranian women, myself included, as it focused on the so-called burnt generation, who spent their childhood during Dahe-e-Shast, Persian for the 60s. That refers to the period 1981 to 1990. We grew up in the turmoil of war and witnessed radical changes caused by political, social, and cultural upheavals after Iran's 1979 revolution. Such changes managed to strip the nation of its former identity and force the entire population to accept the new standards prescribed by the new system. Those who were against the new system were either suppressed or they had to flee and choose to live in exile. I believe we Dahe-e-Shasti women were the most vulnerable part of Iran's population, as our identities and subjectivities were affected in that time and got associated with some peculiar memories that are always haunting us. Sleeping with the constant fear of hearing sirens warning of bombshell attacks, observing false hijab in public, and being bent under the pressure of the patriarchal society. A few examples of the horror that grew inside us. A collection of all these events and restrictions led to millions of Iranians leaving their homeland, and many are still leaving and living in exile, having abandoned their families, their homeland, and their culture. The originality of my research lies in depicting the peculiar characteristics and different aspects of Dahe-e-Shast and its legacy on a generation of women who have migrated to the UK due to several purposes, something that will make my research unique and help me to contribute to the existing knowledge. In fact, my documentary photography is focusing on some identity-torn and fragmented subjects cast away from their origins, using a psychoanalytic approach that enables me to delve into the depth of their psyche and explore the psychoanalytic reasons behind their obsessions. My participants will be interviewed and they will be interpreted through psychoanalytic theories. The characters in my photographs are anonymized, except their eyes. Their gaze will be the bridge to communicate between the viewer and the viewed. The obscurity would help me to protect their identities. On the other hand, anonymity serves as universal samples, and this is due to the fact that some parts of my participants' face are not visualized, something that makes viewers curious about the character behind the black line. The anonymity represents no one, but at the same time, everyone living in exile all around the world. I'm sure my research will come to fruition and will arrive at an indispensable outcome. And it is original, and that is address some very important cultural and historical aspects of the very unique phase of contemporary Iran. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sama. That was wonderful, and you were perfectly on time then as well. So thank you for that. So as mentioned, we will hold our questions towards the end. So please stick with us, and we will therefore move on to our next presenter. So thank you. I would therefore like to introduce our next presenter, Imogen Harry. So while we just wait for that to load up, one moment. Okay, so we've got Imogen there.
Hi.
Perfect. Hi, Imogen, welcome. So as I've just mentioned, I will hand over to you, and I will pop my hand up just as a refresh with 30 seconds to go. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our second presenter. Imogen, please take it away. Thank you.
Imagine that you're an experienced counsellor working in a secondary school. Most of your clients are referred because of substantial emotional and/or behavioural issues, and you've got rather a long waiting list. Your first client has been referred because her best friend committed suicide a couple of months ago, and she blames herself. Your next client has been in foster care for most of his life, but he doesn't trust adults, including yourself. Now it's break time, and a member of staff asks you a question about another client. You find it quite difficult to know how to answer it, and you feel as though you're navigating a rather small boat in a rather rough sea. How do you cope? Well, you take it to supervision. Supervision is the fundamental support for counsellors, and I wanted to find out how experienced secondary school-based counsellors experienced and described good practice in supervision. The outcomes of this qualitative research will have a real impact on supervision training and the future well-being and quality of school counselling work. I'm currently interviewing experienced school counsellors, some of whom are supervisors as well. And the data is being analysed using grounded theory methods and is informed by situation analysis, which has a particular focus on people in situations and contexts. Some of the outcomes have surprised me. Counsellors described really unhelpful supervision. For example, I used to really dread going to supervision then, and it was as though I was trying to protect my own clients from my supervisor. However, I also heard stories of really helpful supervision and good practice. It's about offloading. It's a place that's safe, and also it's about being held so I can get on do my job. Now, my research so far seems to indicate that supervisors need to have an understanding of the territory, so to speak. 3 C's, as I call it: context, client, and counsellor. They need to understand the working context and how the school setting impacts on therapeutic work. They need to understand the client and how to work therapeutically with that age group, including risk and safeguarding issues. And they need to know and understand the counsellor in front of them and the importance of the supervisor relationship. And how did they say and describe that supervisors need to be? Well, they needed to be compassionate, autonomous, that means external to the organisation, robust, enthusiastic and experienced, to be able to shed light on what was needed. And as one counsellor said, my supervisor is my lighthouse.
Thank you so much, Imogen. That was lovely. Thank you very much. So again, Yeah, please keep your questions at the end, and I'm sure we'll come back with that. I think I'll just pause a moment for people to say they're well done, because normally we'd have a lovely round of applause here that we aren't able to facilitate, and I was conscious of some of those coming through as well during the talk, so maybe I'll pause for a moment to let those come through, so we make sure that our new speaker can start before that. Yes, so we're having our virtual round of applause for both of you there as well, so thank you so much. Okay, great, that's perfect. I feel like we're going to keep going here. Okay then, so while we just finish off our congratulations there, if I just, if Kirsty wish to get ready, I'll introduce our next speaker, which is Kirsty Parrott. Have we got our slide for Kirsty?
Kirsty isn't doing it, sorry.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Okay then, so I think if I'm looking at my list, sorry if I don't have, I've made an error there. So I think looking at my list then, Annie, you're next up. Have we got Annie Mccartney here on our ready to go? Perfect. We've got Annie's slide there. That's wonderful. Annie, are you there with us?
Penny, I'm just putting on my audio now. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah, no problem. I can hear you fine, Annie. Just give it, you can have a second if you wish.
No, good to go, Penny.
We're good to go. Perfect then. Right. Well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Annie, please take it away.
Brenda, everybody, good afternoon. I'm not really going to talk about my research at all, which was looking at the value of technology-enhanced learning and evidence in compliance with the student contract. But I'm going to draw upon my experiences in the full knowledge that I am a member of staff on a full salary. But what I realised was that I was wasting so much time trying to put together documents that, when properly designed, were so much better and looked so much better than I could do myself. But a few housekeeping points just to remind you that when you have documents designed either in USW, as two on the right there and one on the left externally, that design still remains with the designer, and the same issues of plagiarism and copyright still remain. If I look at the first one, which is the PhD storyboard, I did my PhD via a portfolio project route, but I can't tell you how useful this was to document your whole storyboard from 1 to 18 points, or how many points it is, in terms of every stage that you went through. I find that invaluable just before I did my Viva, because you had conceptualized everything on one page, from your aims, your objectives, your research methodology, projects themselves, the key questions that you were going to ask. It was fantastic, and that design has already been done in USW, and I would say to all of you to try and do that just for yourselves, because it really did put everything in context for me. The other document on the left hand side, I had this done externally, because every student, whatever route of dissertation you're doing, will have key research threads that are interwoven and central to meshing them together for your research. And the 6 different concepts there, the 6 golden threads, if you like, were centering on the classroom coalface and the experience for students about what happened there. That was expensive to do, but students, I find, are much more IT adept than I am, and you might do that as a pyramid or whatever shape you want it to do. But again, I thought conceptualizing that and translating that into a diagram was so helpful in terms of being able to explain myself at the Viva. The final one there is, and I'm going to quote from very recently, Tan Hing Jing, who said that, for us to survive in these appalling pandemic times, we have to split across the disciplines. Those working in silos, and because law, education, ethics and philosophy not only encompassed disciplines at one level, they were sub-disciplines and sub-disciplines, and so having a discipline tree in that way, I also is fantastic. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Annie. I was going to step in then and stop you, but you finished your sentence, so perfect. Great timing. Thank you very much. Okay then, so yeah, we'll just hold on 1 second while they come through. Great job. So our next speaker then is Claire Johnson. So we'll just get Claire's slides set up 1 moment, and we'll just make sure those messages come through. Well done. There's your virtual round of applause. I quite like these virtual round of applauses actually. they're really good. So thank you everybody. Okay, perfect. All right then, Claire, do you want to just check that we can hear you okay?
Yes, hello. Hi, Penny.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Perfect indeed. All right then, well, without further ado, I will hand over to you, Claire. Please kick us off.
Thank you very much. My PhD is on academic integrity, and in particular looking at the challenges that increasingly easy access to online resources can bring in terms of plagiarism and contract cheating. They can become tempting options for students who are under stress at assessment times. It's important to think about why integrity is relevant, and if you think of some of the subject areas that we deliver, you'll begin to understand that awarding a degree on the basis of work that isn't the student's own could be really critical in terms of consequences. We typically think of integrity most when it goes wrong, and to prevent misconduct, we need to understand students' perceptions. So my primary research looked at what students understand of these terms. And whilst they don't really understand what academic integrity is, they're really clear on what plagiarism means. I then turned to looking at detection. And at the university we have Turnitin, which is really good at detecting copy and paste plagiarism, but actually isn't very good at detecting contract cheating. Turnitin are working on tools relating to authorship, looking at stylometrics and linguistics. So these will help, but ultimately we would turn to a viva to determine the student's knowledge and understanding of the subject. Inevitably, we use our spidey sense to tell us whether there's something wrong with an assessment. And clearly this isn't sufficient evidence to take a student to academic misconduct panels. I then looked at using digital forensic techniques to see whether it would be possible to establish ownership of work using these techniques. These are already used in intellectual property cases and computer crime. If you think of a word submission as basically a container for a series of other documents which tell us about how the computer will display not only the text, but things like the formatting and the style. And in the background, there's some really rich data that tells us how the document has been constructed. Whenever a student edits a piece of work, it leaves behind a sequence of tags in the back end of the document. And these remain within the document throughout the duration of its life, even if the text is actually deleted. I've done at the top a sort of barcode example of what this looks like. So on the left-hand side, we have a visual representation of what we would expect a typical student submission to look like. You can see that it's littered throughout with edits amongst the text, and this is what we would expect to see. On the right-hand side, however, you can see that it's much blockier because the student hasn't edited the work in the same way, and this would raise flags then to the assessor. So this is what I'm working on at the present, is developing a tool that raises this information at an earlier stage for the assessor to review. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you so much, Claire. And again, great timing there that we finished. So again, we will take your virtual round of applause there. So thank you very much for that. And just 1 moment then before we move on to our final speaker of the block, Michael Dark, we have it next. So Michael, we'll just get your slide ready, and yeah, we'll just wait for you to come through. Michael, do you just want to check your sound there for a moment for us?
Hopefully I'm audible.
Yes, you are indeed. Okay, we'll just give it 2 seconds. Just wait for those pop-ups coming through, just so you've got a good place to start. Okay then. Well, last but not least then, I would like to introduce Michael. Please take it away.
Thank you, Penny. Anaerobic digestion is a sequence of processes by which microorganisms break down organic material in the absence of oxygen. The products are biogas, methane, and carbon dioxide, and sludges suitable as fertilizers. They play an important role in the reduction of greenhouse gases and nutrient and energy recovery. AD, anaerobic digestion, has played a significant role since the early 1990s in the UK renewable energy expansion. Although the two processes, anaerobic digestion and sewage gas, are essentially the same, they're typically quantified separately. But together they represent about 4% of the UK renewable energy generation. There's an installed capacity of 748 megawatts, providing 3,673 gigawatt hours of energy, electricity energy in 2018. Now, organic materials are extremely complex, and there's a diverse range of feedstocks. They come from agriculture, manures, and agro-industrial, domestic and industrial food waste. Typically, they have high water content and high carbon to nitrogen ratios, and it's rich in organic materials. Quantitative assessment of AD products is currently a manual and very time-consuming process. It is often at least carried out weekly or even monthly. But this poses a significant risk as the treated sludges or digestates are spread on farmland. The basic tenet is that this recycles the nutrients that may otherwise be lost. However, there is a risk that excessive loading of, say, nitrates could create unwanted materials on the land. The solution is an online continuous measurement system, and the method I'm investigating is near-infrared. Now, near-infrared is an established technique for real-time quality assurance. NIR uses the infrared region of the electromagnetic spectrum, and the basic theory is that the bonds between different elements absorb light at different frequencies, such as between carbon and oxygen, and hydrogen and oxygen. Using a high-intensity data collection and analysis integrated with the near-infrared spectra that I collect, I am seeking to understand the variance between the different products, both chemically and physically. The results I expect to generate are a classification of materials, which could help us with traceability, and calibration models for various constituents. Finally, combining the models will help me form a control system that will improve process efficiency, improve biogas production, and hopefully enable a better nutrient recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much there, Michael. Thank you very much. That was great. Okay then. Well, that brings us to the end then of our sort of formal 3MT section. But as I mentioned at the beginning, we now have some opportunity to ask some questions. So as I mentioned, we have a little bit of time left at the end of the session to do that. So please feel free to either pop your hand up or pop a message in chat if you would prefer. I'm just trying to keep an eye on the chat for messages of well done versus messages of questions as well. So yes, do we have any questions from the audience? Gina's got her hand up. Thank you, Gina. Can I hand over to you then, please?
Hi, I haven't turned my camera on, but yeah, thanks for all those presentations. That's great. It's really hard to do the 3 minutes, so well done, everyone. I've got a question for Imogen. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about situation analysis and why you chose that for your research.
Yes, the reason that I chose it, I decided to do grounded theory because basically there's very little on supervising counsellors. And the situation analysis seemed really pertinent to this because, of course, the whole research is really about the context. It's about counsellors working within schools, and it's about them getting supervision from perhaps somebody in school or somebody external. And what situation analysis does, it really unpicks and it informs the data in a way. So, for example, what counsellors have been saying is, oh yeah, we really need to have supervisors that have experienced working in schools. You know, some of them are saying, oh yeah, we need to have that. But some of them are saying, actually, it's really unhelpful if they're in the school as well. And so what happens is you can sort of position it, and so that they're saying actually the relationship's much more important than actually them having this experience, and you can sort of pinpoint it. Perhaps you need to see my camera because I'm using my hands around. Okay, hang on. So what they do is they kind of pinpoint point where it is. So, you know, even though counsellors are saying, well, I need to have a supervisor that's got lots of experience, there are also counsellors saying, actually, when you've got somebody with experience, they're just so much focused on their own remit about sort of cutting down waiting lists or their own stuff about working in schools, that they don't understand it. So it's kind of quite low. And then you've got other people saying that actually, no, the relationship's really important. And sometimes I have a supervisor that doesn't actually even work with children and young people. But it kind of helps you understand what it is. And so what came out of that was the fact that they wanted to have a supervisor who kind of foundationally just understood the situation. They didn't necessarily have to have experienced it, but they understood it. It was an unspoken thing that didn't have to be explained all the time. And that was kind of what came out of using situation analysis. So it was actually positioning people within that.
That's great. Thanks, Imogen. That was great. And I think Gina's mentioned there. Yeah, indeed. Perfect. Thank you for your question, Gina, and thank you, Imogen, for going through that. Indeed. Okay, so we'll just move over to the next question. Simon Downs, I see you've got your hand up there. Do you have a question for one of our speakers?
I do, yes. My question would be related to the contract cheating and that sort of thing. So mine's to Claire. Does she think that it would be better for things like service providers to actually start to highlight what organisations actually provide sort of essay services and that sort of thing? Would it be worthwhile looking at searching those from that aspect, as well as obviously from a student perspective, because there's so many out there? How would you sort of identify?
Are you referring to the people, the sort of companies that provide the essay writing services?
Yeah, because obviously, I mean, funny enough, completed my undergraduate at Trinity, and it was a major problem there. We had 3 or 4 students who were identified as using services to actually provide reports for sort of quite substantial networking stuff. And they purchased them from people, funny enough, who had gone through university and had set up just through Facebook and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I mean, I'd say there are 2 angles there. You know, firstly, there's the sort of issue in terms of what students understand of essay writing services, and it can be a bit of a muddy line between when they're getting support in writing an essay that's sort of, you know, acceptable levels of support, to actually having somebody write the work for them. And, you know, there are real risks behind that, not only in terms of the qualification, you know, and how or whether you actually are able to obtain the qualification eventually. But also, you know, there's a knock-on effect, because it has been known that these essay writing services will then blackmail the students afterwards and say, if you don't pay me some more money, I'm going to let the university know that you've actually bought your essay from me. So there's that side of thing. And then there's also the issue from the university's perspectives about, you know, how we approach now in legislation in some countries. Essay writing services it's illegal for them to advertise their services. That isn't the case in the UK as yet. So I think it's something that's being considered.
Yeah, definitely. It would add to obviously the rigor of a degree where somebody's worked hard as opposed to somebody who's just sort of bought their way through, as it were. So, no, thank you.
Good question.
Indeed, yes. Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you, Claire, there. Do we have any further questions from our audience at all? I'm just having a look just in our chats into our questions. Perfect. Oh, I can hear somebody coming through. I was just trying to pause. Not sure whether we've got their microphone on there a moment.
Yeah, that was just me, Penny.
Oh, Paul. Would you like to add something there, Paul?
Just coming in to do an announcement at the end if everybody's finished. So, but I'll let people finish first.
We did just have a hand up then from Angela. I saw flash up, but I think that's just gone. Angela, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. It was for Claire, and it's exactly how might you define acceptable. It's a very woolly concept, and if you could actually define it, then you could have students playing up to the line and getting assistance.
Yeah, hi Angela. It's a really tricky one. I mean, you know, there are sort of proofreading services, sort of the term that's used. You know, we've sort of had this discussion with people who work in this field many times, and you know, one of the things I would sort of advocate is that students only use internal proofreading services, because those, we know what services those offer. We can be quite clear about where they will go and where they will sort of stop and say, no, this is not, you know, you need to do this bit of work yourself now. But I think having a specific definition is really difficult, because people will always interpret those things in their own way anyway. So it's not an easy answer, I'm afraid.
And would that actually be applied to international students who, I know their language is supposed to be up to a particular standard, but in my experience, some of them actually lack confidence and use things like Google Translate?
Yeah, and it's worse than that, because they can use things which are sort of paraphrasing tools, which will sort of take a piece of work in their native language and then convert it, but also actually could potentially change the actual meaning of what's being said as well. And that is a real challenge for international students, because you know, they're inevitably going to need that bit of extra support, but it's how that sort of manifests itself that's important.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Well, looking at our time then, before I just hand over back to Paul just to finish the session, just to say thank you all for participating in the sessions in particular. You know, in this new sort of virtual setup, I think it's even a little bit more daunting when you can't see who's on the other end as well. So well done to everybody, and thank you for your time and the interesting talks. And again, thank you to the audience for partaking in that, and your virtual support.